Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Career Center's Careers in Biotechnology and Pharmacology program. My name is Roni Rufian. I'm one of the assistant directors, career counselors at the UCLA Career Center. I'm joined tonight with my colleague Christina. She'll be helping us in the back end and answering any questions that you guys have about our services and this amazing career path. We do have three amazing panelists joining us tonight, so we're really excited to have them. The format for tonight, pretty simple. I'm going to do a really quick Career Center overview for those of you, if this is your first time visiting us, so you have some information about our services and how you can schedule an appointment with myself or Christina or all of our other amazing counselors. And then I will jump into about a 45-minute Q&A with our three panelists, ask them some questions and so on, leave some time if you guys have any questions in the main room to ask, and then you'll have the opportunity to network. I'll open up breakout room sessions, and you can pick and choose and jump from breakout room to breakout room and ask your individual questions from the panelists. My goal is to end the session before 5:20 or so tonight, just so that you guys can continue the rest of your evening. All right. If you do have any questions as I'm going through the session, as I'm doing the Q&A, if you can kind of hold it towards the end so that, we're not necessarily, if we're not checking the chat and so on, for the panelists and they can answer it, I'll definitely give some time for you guys to ask questions in the main room as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for those of you, if this is your first time visiting the Career Center, we are located at 501 Westwood Plaza. So we are super south campus next to the Luskin Conference Center. We're literally attached to parking lot 8. We have a lot of great programming in person and virtual, so you definitely have access to work with us with both ways. Regarding counseling appointments, we do offer in-person virtual 30-minute sessions. Those appointments are available through Handshake under the appointments tab. Just kind of, be aware they do get taken up really quickly. At times, students do tell us that it is a little bit challenging to get those appointments, but we post them every Friday between 2 and 4 p.m. And they're only available up to 2 weeks in advance. So if you go in there and you see there's nothing available for the rest of the quarter, that's not the case. That calendar is only visible up to 2 weeks. We do offer drop-in sessions as well, virtually and in person, and those are Tuesdays through Thursdays from 10 to 12 and 1 to 3. Those sessions are great if you're having a hard time scheduling those 30-minute sessions to come in, talk to us. We have our career peers on as well. Even though they're shorter, you can definitely gain a lot of information and resources. We have counselors on the whole time as well. So like I'm on Tuesdays from 10 to 12. And those appointments are pretty slow. We don't, depending on the time of the quarter, it's not a big rush. So you can definitely connect with a counselor or a career peer if you do a drop-in session. We have tons of workshops and events on Handshake, just like this. We have our fair tomorrow. So our STEM fair and our higher fair was rescheduled together for tomorrow in Ackerman Grand Ballroom. So if you go under our events page on Handshake, you'll get the list of all the rest of our events that are happening this quarter. We do offer employer information sessions, which is great because a lot of these employers that do the information sessions through Handshake are also the same employers who are going to our fairs and same employers who are connecting with you in other areas of campus. So it's a great way to help yourself in building a network and if you're a senior, securing a job after you graduate. So feel free to take a look at those info sessions. We do graduate school advising too. So our panelists, you get to talk to them tonight and network with them. They have a graduate degree or they've gotten their PhD and so on. So you can talk about that process. But we also do advising for that as well. So if you're interested in pursuing a master's or a PhD, you can definitely come and talk to us regarding timeline, personal statement, all of that great all of those great requirements. The only thing we don't advise on is prerequisites for grad school, and we would work with you and make sure that you know who to connect with academic advising for that. And then our website's great. We have tons of articles and digital resources to help you within your career development. Within Handshake, there's a lot of great resources. We tend to, we've embedded these resources in Handshake under the resources tab because it'll be free for you guys as long as you have access to Handshake. So a lot of these databases, if you just go on it, they would charge you. But if you go through Handshake, since you're a UCLA student, you have free access to it. So make sure to take a look at Handshake. VMOC is great for your resume. It gives you a lot of good content and feedback regarding your resume, and then you can, for example, come into drop-ins and have us help you with that. Focus 2 is amazing if you are thinking like you want to do something related to biotech or pharmacology, but you're not sure. Focus 2 has a lot of really fun career assessments that you can take, and it gives you ideas of career paths that you can pursue that are maybe similar, or it could reaffirm what it is that you're interested in. So take a look at our resources page on Handshake. There's a lot of great valuable information and databases in there that can help you with your career development. There is one program. Unfortunately, we were going to have the speaker come in, but they weren't able to last minute. But for those of you who are interested in going through a program, UCLA, in collaboration with Amgen, has a UCLA Amgen Scholar program. Unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with it, but you can easily look it up. The deadline is coming up February 1st, and it sounds like a really great opportunity for the summer. It's a 10-week program that UCLA hosts with Amgen. So feel free to check it out. I don't have a link because, again, the speaker was going to be here to talk to you guys about it, but you're more than welcome to, you could easily Google search it and it'll come up as well. Christina, I don't know if you put it in the chat. You're really good at doing stuff like that.
I did.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So Christina just put the link in the chat for you all to take a look at if you're interested. For those of you who are seniors, just so that you know, you have access to work with us up to 3 months after you graduate, and you have access to Handshake up to a year. So if you're graduating in June, you can work with the counseling team till the end of September. And then you still have access 1 year after that. So as far as finding jobs and attending some virtual programming, if you wanted to attend some virtual programming, you still would have access to some of those and our fairs and so on. So just kind of being aware of your timeline if you are graduating this year. Are there any quick questions about our services? And you could just raise your hand or unmute or put it in the chat. And if not, we will move forward to meeting our panelists. All right. So again, we have 3 amazing panelists who took time out of their busy day to be here with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each panelist introduce themselves and go through some questions that I have pre-prepared already. And then again, if you have any questions, we will definitely leave time for you guys to get those answered as well. So let me start off with Young. I have you on my page as the first person. So if you guys want to go ahead, Young, if you can start and just kind of give us a brief introduction. Obviously, your name. Tell us about your major at UCLA for undergrad, if you are a UCLA alumni, a graduate degree, who you work for, and your title.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Young, and I want to thank Roni and the UCLA Career Center team for hosting this panel and inviting me. I work in biotech as a quality control associate at FUJIFILM Diosynth Biotechnologies. A bit about my background. I transferred to UCLA in 2017, finished my bachelor's in biochemistry in 2020, and then I'm an alumni, and I took some time off from school after feeling a little burnt out, and then I did a summer program through Berkeley called BASE during the summer of 21. And I'm slowly getting back into school since last year, taking some continuing education courses and uh, extension courses through UCLA and UCSD to work towards my next goals.
Thank you so much. Jim, I have you next on my screen.
Hello, my name is Jim Loussaert. I'm a principal scientist over here at Amgen. So I did not go to UCLA. I did go to a UC school though. I got my undergraduate degree in chemistry from the University of Iowa. And then I moved out to California and I got my master's in science in physical chemistry at UC Irvine. After that, I went and worked for a company in Pasadena called Smith's Detection. My specialty was kind of surface chemistry and surface science. I was working with them as a materials scientist, working to develop uh, chemical sensors for them. So they were developing these little wearable chemical sensors that you could imagine like a emergency first responder or a soldier would wear on their like shoulder pack, and be constantly monitoring the air for toxic gases, and would just start screaming bloody murder if it detected something. So I was developing materials for that. The company decided to close our site and laid everyone off. At that point in time, I had the brilliant idea that I wanted to become a professor. So I went back to grad school and moved to Austin, Texas, and studied electrochemistry and surface chemistry at University of Texas at Austin. Um, I did that for a few years, and honestly, I wasn't really happy. I wasn't happy with being in academia, and I decided I needed a change. So after publishing a couple papers, I left UT Austin without a degree, moved back to California. And got a job. My first job in biotech, I was working for a company called Eurofin Lancaster Labs, and they provided what they called insourcing solutions or contract workers to biotech companies, and that biotech company was Amgen. So I worked with them as a more or less in the current role that I'm in for about 4 years. I also was a group leader for them, which I managed a small team of scientists of about 12 people, and was also the hiring manager for about 50 some odd people while I was a group leader for them. Amgen reevaluated their contract with Eurofins, and I technically got laid off, but then got hired on by Amgen to continue on in my same position. And so I've been with Amgen full time for about 6 years now. But I've been working at this site for a little over 10 now. So
Thank you so much, Jim. All right. And Austin?
Hi, everybody. My name is Austin Quach. I'm at home with some kids, so if you hear some screaming, just please ignore it. Um, so I was at UCLA basically from close to beginning to end. I got my bachelor's in biochemistry in like 2012, and then I got my PhD in human genetics in the human genetics department. Graduated in like 2018-ish or so after like a year post back. And then I did a 1 year postdoc in a lab doing bioinformatics. And shortly after, based on some of the work in my grad school, I decided to launch a startup. And so I've been working at that startup with my co-founder for the last 6 years or so, and it's been kind of it's been a journey, but fortunately we are doing okay now. Hopefully better and great in the near future.
Thank you.
And yeah, so that's me.
Thank you so much, Austin. All right, since I have you on and your kids aren't screaming, I'm going to start with you with the next question. So you guys all kind of, expanded a little bit on your undergraduate degree and your graduate degree. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you chose your advanced degree, or I know Young, for example, you did some extension programs. Jim, you talked about a master's. Austin, you talked about a PhD. So if you guys can expand on that a little bit, maybe talk about why you chose your undergraduate degree as what you did, or what made you decide to pursue that, and then the direction as far as advanced degree and how that pertains to where you are today.
Sure. I don't know if I would advise this for other people, but at least in my case, it was initially the choice of like biochemistry or biology in the beginning, and then following that up was really based on intellectual interest. So I just found chemistry was interesting, biology was interesting, and then I was always guided in the back of my mind of a goal. Like, this is kind of weird, but my cousins and I, we basically had this goal of, oh yeah, let's help people somehow. And it was around preventative medicine. So I always kind of hovered in that area, learning the stuff that I needed to pursue preventative medicine. And so first it was biochemistry, and then I learned a little bit of pharmacology. And then I decided, okay, well, the future is more about computation and coding and omics data, like genomics data or proteomics data. So then that's what led me to my PhD, and then that's what led me to my startup. So I wouldn't say it's a generalizable lesson, but at least that's the path that I took.
Thank you, Jim.
So I always knew that I was going to be in the sciences. So I chose my undergraduate degree when I was still in high school. I come from a family of I guess STEM people. My father has a PhD in plant physiology. My mother was a science and math teacher in high school and middle school. My eldest sister is a high school math teacher, and my other sister is a nurse practitioner. So to be perfectly frank, it wasn't until middle school that I realized you could go to college for a degree of something other than science. Um, so I chose chemistry, kind of similar to Austin. It was intellectual interest. I remember being in high school and studying for my AP chemistry exam and thinking to myself, I could do this for 4 years and be happy with myself. Um, and so that's how I chose chemistry. And then as I chose kind of other research groups, to be perfectly frank, I kind of almost stumbled into them to a certain extent. I joined the research group that I joined in undergrad was because I'm also a member of the chemistry fraternity, Alpha Chi Sigma, which there is a chapter there at UCLA. Some of my co members were also in that lab, so that's why I joined it, and that's how I started getting into physical chemistry. I moved out to California and picked something that was kind of more spectroscopy related because that's kind of what I did in undergrad. Um, and when I left, when I got my master's degree and left, I was kind of looking for a job, so I kind of cast the net very wide, and that's how I landed a position in material science. Um, then the kind of when I moved on into graduate school, uh, I continued on kind of wanting to look at material science, and I realized also that at University of Texas at Austin has one of the best electrochemistry programs, not only in the country but in the world. And so that's kind of why I went into the electrochemistry program there to kind of study under who were kind of considered to be the greats in the field. Um, and all this time, I had not studied biology at all. And so the way that I got, when I left graduate school for a second time and was looking for looking for another job, I had a lot of experience doing electron microscopy and FTIR spectroscopy and Raman spectroscopy and X-ray fluorescence, not X-ray fluorescence, sorry, X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy. And there was this job at that ultimately was at Amgen that just happened to slate me in right into that position. I just had the right experience, and the fact that I had never worked in biochemistry or in biotechnology. was less of an issue because Amgen very much has kind of has a policy of like, well, if we think we can train you, we can work with you. Um, so that's kind of how I got into that job, and I've been here for, like I said, about 10 years now. So I'm probably staying in biotech.
Thank you. Young?
Yeah, so I mean, I chose biochemistry because I mean, my decision was pretty clear cut. I had a passion for physical science, and growing up, like I had family members who had cancer and some who passed away. And while they were fighting off cancer, the word chemotherapy was thrown around a lot. And I always wondered what exactly did it mean to have chemotherapy. And I was also a pre-med track and just trying to do well in classes, but uh, UCLA was a humbling experience to say the least, and it steered me in a different direction. And yeah, I still have pretty strong background and interest in STEM. But what really pushed me to look into the biotech industry was due to the COVID-19 impact. Um, and just trying to figure out, like, after graduating, what exactly I wanted to do uh, in terms of, building a career and trying to find my way into somewhere healthcare field related.
Thank you so much. All right, so my next question, Young, we'll start with you since you're right here on my screen. Can you walk us through kind of what your typical day looks like? What is it that you do within your company? And just to follow up with that, and I'll come back to the question, what are qualifications needed? So maybe let's just start with what does a typical day look like for you? And then we can transition into what are some qualifications to make it through your day? What are some, advice that you might have for students to be able to get to where you are in
Yeah.
your profession?
So my typical day at Fuji, as a QC analyst, really depends on like testing dates that are aligned with the manufacturing department schedules. So some days I'll be required to execute quality tests for the therapeutic cells that we make. And then some of the tests include like immunophenotyping, using the flow cytometer, compendial tests like endotoxin tests, pH concentrations, viability of the cells, visual inspections of the vials. And other days we do like cell culture work, where we have to maintain and reseed growing cells. And then working in QC requires you to have good documentation practices and good manufacturing process practices, meaning you have to follow strictly the SOP and method, exactly how it's written. And we're also asked to revise and update SOPs and methods as part of our continuous improvement plans. FDBC, the company that I work at, is a CDMO. So it's a contract development and manufacturing organization. So we're continuously looking for clients to work with and produce at a larger scale. So we want to continue refining our practices to make sure that we deliver the products for other companies as best as possible. And then for the qualifications for the job, I would say you would definitely need some knowledge and researching into HLA. HLA stands for human leukocyte antigens. Learning about organ transplantation is also important. Studying immunology and some of the backgrounds in it is also important. And PTLD is also something that you should have some background in. PTLD is post-transplant disorders. Other qualifications, I would say having a strong GDP, GMP rigidity, and continuing to show that you're willing to learn. Having flow cytometry experience, mammalian cell culture experience. Yeah, just staying curious and up to date with the latest in the scientific community, focusing on continuous improvements, seeing where you can help the department make some efficiencies or cost reductions. And also a requirement for quality is you want to value consistency and integrity. So yeah.
I'm going to jump in really quick just to follow up. Any soft skills that you recommend students to have?
Yeah.
Transferable skills?
So being able to be collaborative, working with other people, communication's also a strong requirement. Reaching out to different departments and you know, just making sure that you're able to work with managers from different departments as well as colleagues in different departments.
Thank you so much. Jim, can you tell us about your typical day and any skills and qualifications that you see?
Yeah. So the group that I work within a larger division. It's mostly like a analytical chemist, and the group that I work in is called the forensics group. And in a nutshell, we provide the scientific support when something goes wrong in manufacturing. A lot of that is isolation and identification of contaminants. So we work really closely with our quality control team, just like with Young, um, where he would mention if doing visual inspections, if you ever have some a vial or a syringe, prefilled syringe that would fail a visual inspection, oftentimes it would get sent to us to do further analysis to figure out, okay, what's the contaminant that's in there that's causing it to fail visual inspection. Um, uh, and so because of that, what I do on a day-to-day basis changes a lot. That is I think one of the best parts about my job. Is what keeps it interesting is that everything's a little bit different. It's also kind of one of the most frustrating things is I can never plan when something's gonna go. You can never plan when something's gonna go wrong in manufacturing. So I may, I may have no investigations I have to deal with for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm just working on other projects. Or I could have a series of 2 weeks where I'm just getting investigation after investigation after investigation because new samples are coming in from all across Amgen that we have to support. Um, the qualifications for my team, I as I kind of said before, it's more about being able to problem solve. Exactly what what your I guess you say hard skills um, are take a back seat as long as you're trainable. One of the most recent person that we hired, she's been with us for about 6 years. She originally was previously she had worked for 9 years in environmental science, and she was doing a lot of GC analysis. We do not do GC analysis at all in my group, but she seemed like the most trained of the candidates that we were looking at. She seemed to be to me to be the most trainable and best able to solve problems that we kind of threw at her. I also thought that her background in GC might come in handy in the long run, even though it's not something we do on a day-to-day basis. But having that separation experience on the team, I thought was going to be very valuable. So she got hired on not because she had the perfect set of skills that matched what we do, but because we thought that in the long run she was going to be a much more valuable asset to the company. Um, Soft skills, I agree. I agree with Young being collaborative. You can't really get very far in a biotech setting without being very collaborative across all different divisions within the company, especially when you're trying to deal with manufacturing issues. So you're working with quality, you're working with the people who are developing the methods, you're working with the people who are trying to troubleshoot the methods, which are sometimes not the same people who develop them. You're working with the manufacturing floor, you're working with all the fill people. So being able to work with all those people effectively I think is a very important soft skill to have. But as for other expertise. Like I said, in our division, it's a lot of analytical chemists, so being able to know the basics of analytical chemistry um, is a very big plus as well. But at the same time, not I personally don't think is a deal breaker. So
Thank you so much, Austin.
Yeah. Let me think. I'm digesting a little bit. Okay, so I tend to I'll just start off with like some general qualification related things that are related to what Jim said. I think the major factors in all of the people that I encounter in my work that are differentiating between like let's say people you want to work with and people you might not want to work with so much is at least in my work is like critical thought and then active versus passive behavior, right? When in a startup, um, basically everything is on fire all the time. Well, hopefully we've gotten past that stage, but in a lot of scenarios, there's a lot of troubleshooting and limited information. And so the last person you want on your team is a person who's kind of just like autopiloting. And so I know everybody kind of autopilots, but the more active you are in trying to problem solve and gather resources and help your team move forward, um, the better. And then also that ties into with critical thought, right? In order to actively pursue those resources to help solve problems, you need to think critically about what you need, right? Okay, in order to fix this fire, I need a fire extinguisher. Where can I find the fire extinguisher? It's over here. This is a simple situation, but I think tracking down contaminants, tracking down why the LC is like leaking, or how can I get this part that needs to be replaced? It's yeah. Let's just say the people that we like to work with are active and think logically and critically. In terms of what I do on a daily basis, I there's like the general startup thing. I'll describe what I do. Basically, my startup right now, our general work is providing contract research services. So we do omics analysis, so proteomics, transcriptomics, metabolomics, lipidomics. Basically, we measure a bunch of different biochemicals for whoever asks us to. So they'll ask us to measure them. They'll send us samples, and then we'll measure those biochemicals, and then we'll send reports back to them. So we get exposure to a lot of different companies, whether they're like public corps, or like emerging startups, academic labs. All people come to us to try to do that. So a lot of my daily work as basically lead scientist is like emailing, answering questions related to sales, and then actually doing the lab work, like helping to prepare the samples, run the samples, analyze the data, and then reporting back those results. In terms of the actual hard qualifications, there aren't really any. It depends on which role that you want, right? So in a company like mine, or actually most of the biotech companies that we interact with, there's like let's say entry level, and then higher, mid tier, and then upper level. And I'm just going to speak in generalities and stereotypes. These are not completely accurate, but hopefully you can get something from it. So if you do daily work underneath a manager, then you can basically suffice with a bachelor's, and then if you want to independently lead like a group inside of a biotech that's doing its own research program, then there's a bigger and bigger need for credentials. And I'm not a credentialist, like I hate that, but it's true. Like essentially when we had to go out and raise money, the fact that I had a PhD and then my old principal investigator, like my old PI, was supporting me was a big deal, because basically they had some letters to go with our claims on what we wanted to do. And that's the bottom line, is in order to get for people to give you money to do what you want to do, they have to believe you. And then one of the easiest, most cookie cutter ways to get people to believe you is add some letters behind your name. That's not always the case, so you can get money other ways. But yeah. And you know, in passing, kind of, there have been very of the people I know, there have been successful cases, startup founders who don't have any credentials. Basically, they're kind of like uh, bachelors, and then they just do their thing. Um, but you know, out of all the people I know, there's some whispers, or like, oh, I kind of feel like there's a glass ceiling in my company where they kind of feel there's like uh, something soft but invisible stopping them from progressing in their careers, and then they often attribute it to like that those credentials, right? Just like a PhD or a master's or what have you. So your mileage may vary, but I just want to kind of give you a heads up. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you so much, you guys, for definitely that insight and advice, and um, walking through your typical day and degrees. Kind of on the same lines, and Austin, we can start with you. As part of, being a part of a startup and so on, what do you find most challenging, and what do you find most rewarding in doing what it is that you're doing?
Sure. The most challenging part about startup life is basically having to deal with limited resources. I mean, I guess in other endeavors, there's always going to be limited grant money, limited allocations from, you know, your corporate department head. Like you guys get a certain amount of money or budget. But in startups, basically, it's a little bit harsher. Like basically, if we don't meet our goals, then our bank account goes below the red line, and then we have to close the doors. So it's quite stressful um, and exciting at the same time when you make progress. So that's probably the most challenging part, is like limited resources, like true limited resources. Um, I guess in the corporate world, it's a little bit different. Like when they run out of resources, basically they lay off everybody. And but in the startup world, you basically lay everybody off by default because you go bankrupt, right? And I don't know if you asked what was most rewarding, Roni. Okay. So the most rewarding part about our work at the startup is, you know, in CRO work or contract research work, basically helping people to solve problems and seeing that your work actually is helping to fix stuff in the real world. There's like, it's hard to get that feeling anywhere else. Um, so yeah, I guess Jim has the same thing on a semi-daily basis, where you have a problem, it's stopping somebody from doing their work, and then you do some analysis, you use your brain power and your team's work, and then you come up with a solution, and then it works, and then they are able to carry on doing what they do. It feels pretty nice. So that's pretty nice.
Thank you so much, Jim. What do you find most challenging and most rewarding, working for Amgen and the different companies and organizations in your setting?
Um, for me personally, the thing that drives me, what rewards me the most is the kind of the problem solving aspect of it. I really get that dopamine rush, that surge of adrenaline when I've been able to come up with a solution to a problem, and I can collect the data that backs it up. Um, the example I like to give is when I was in working for Smiths. I had this theory about how to reformulate one of our materials, thinking that I could potentially improve its selectivity to specific gases. And I changed the formulation. I ran the test. I was sitting there with another engineer who was helping me run the test with me. And when the data was reading out, I remember jumping up and yelling out in joy, of being like, "Oh my god! It's actually worked! Holy crap!" It was just one of the most like thrilling things. And I get that every time I can solve a difficult or challenging problem with that maybe other people are struggling with. The advantage of working for a big company like Amgen is that we do have resource limitations, but it's definitely not as severe as with obviously with a startup or even a smaller mid-sized company. Um, we just recently we had I had a chiller break on me, and I went to my director and said it's going to cost $8,000 for us to replace this chiller. He's like, okay, can you order it on Monday? I'm like, sure, that's fine. um, uh, and so it's they can find think a company like an Amgen, if it's valuable, and if it's deemed valuable, our directors can usually find especially if it's only a couple $1,000s, and I say that with huge, I guess, air quotes, I guess you could say. It's a bit easier to find that money and those resources. Uh, but I would say kind of the most challenging thing for me, and it's something that I had to develop on, was better communication skills with my team, because I had a tendency of, even though I was not actively being argumentative and kind of pushing back on people, it definitely was perceived that way. So that was a skill that I had to work on, and thankfully I've been able to control myself with that. Where instead, I'm not necessarily seeming like I'm actively challenging people whenever they give their opinions or their ideas. I'm being able to kind of develop some of those soft skills I may not have had. But I will say, another one of the things that was also kind of challenging for me relatively recently, um, in the past like 2 or so years, I suddenly became the subject matter expert for a couple things within the entire company, within the large aspect of all of Amgen, which is a big multinational company. And that suddenly I was the adultier adult, and that terrified me for about an hour or so. I'm like, oh my god, everyone is relying on me to answer these questions. I am the person. Oh god, what happened here? And so that was a very startling realization. And we get into kind of your later career when you suddenly realize you're the expert and you have to be the expert.
Thank you for that. Young?
Yeah. So the most challenging part of my job is especially when you're working in quality. Um yeah, when you make errors, then that leads to deviations. And some of the assays um that we do can be very stressful, and it can take the whole day. Sometimes it can take 10 hours or 12 hours, and sometimes that can lead to hiccups. And then when you spot the error, or if the results look like they're out of spec, then you have to document, communicate to management, and investigate what happened, and then follow the root cause analysis approach. Um, and you kind of go down the rabbit hole, and you're trying to look for what exactly happened that the expected outcome did not come through. And that's where sometimes it can get challenging, or sometimes it's also frustrating, because when sometimes when you do like an assay hundreds of times, and then one time it just doesn't work out, like you wonder like what
Wisconsin.
exactly happened now, you know.
What is it?
Um, but
Hold on a minute.
it's part of the
Wisconsin.
job.
Look at it.
Wisconsin.
Sorry, it's part of the job. And then the most rewarding part of the job is also like executing higher tier assays, and ultimately determining like the quality of the product. Um, and you know, like the end goal is to deliver quality product for a patient out there who needs these medicines to survive, and knowing that you're making sure that the products are safe and receiving and knowing that they will be receiving effective therapy, it feels rewarding. So yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And I apologize for my sound was on and my son's doing states and capitals. So
Oh, no
that's
issues.
what's happening in the back here. Thank
I
you
need
so
to.
much for, walking us through, your challenges and what excites you about your career path. And, I think a lot of students value that advice because when they learn from the experts and they listen to the experts, they really get a sense of what is the reality of the day to day and so on. So I really appreciate, your honesty and talking about what excites you and what those challenges are. I do have two final questions, and then I'm going to open it up to the students so that they can ask questions themselves. What changes do you foresee in your industry, maybe within the next near future, 5 years from now? Are there specific changes that you anticipate students should, be aware of or might affect the way your industry is moving forward or what it is that you're doing day to day? Young, if you don't mind, we can start with you.
Mhm. Yeah. So I definitely see the biotech industry in the next 5 years being able to produce personalized medicine that's more robust and scalable. Um, and I think there will be an accelerated drug development. Um, and with that comes the regulatory aspect, where I think it's inevitable for policies to be revised to keep up with the growing innovative efficiencies. And I think I definitely see artificial intelligence being fully integrated to drug formulation and also drug discovery. I need to get a charger, uh, so give me 1 second.
Sounds good. Jim?
Yeah, and, next 5 years is gonna be interesting. I there you're gonna have you're gonna potentially see some changes in some aspects of the regulatory landscape, especially with the new administration that's coming in. However, in biotech and in pharmaceutical, um, we're not just regulated by the FDA. We're regulated by uh, 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 Canada. Oh God, now by the equivalent of the FDA in Canada, in the EU, in the UK, in China, in Japan, in Brazil. Those are kind of the other five major regulatory bodies, and we have to be able to maintain that level of regulation for all of those bodies, not just for the U.S. Currently in the past, they're all kind of harmonized together, but at the same time, even if one of those major uh, um, bodies somehow change, it's not really cost effective to suddenly start making something a lower quality or lower regulated quality just because one of those markets relaxes some of their requirements because we make our for example one of our main manufacturing sites for one of our particular products there we have three manufacturing sites that make it. One's in Israel, one is in Denmark, and one is in Puerto Rico. And they supply the world supply of that. We're not going to change just because we're not going to change the process for that particular drug just because one market has loosened their regulatory requirements. Because that would mean opening up a brand new site that's just catering to one particular market. But anyway, in any case, AI I think is going to be a valuable tool, but I don't I know what people are probably thinking is AI going to replace people's jobs. AI has been kind of in biotech for a long time. It just was not called AI, in my opinion. It was things like oh, I'm blanking on the terms. It was just higher level computational analysis that has been present for over a decade. And it just wasn't called AI, but it's just kind of the same principle. You train a computer model to do something, and then you feed it information, and it spits out answers. Um, yeah, we've been using stuff like that for a decade now. It just was never called AI. So I think that's going to be, as that gets more powerful, it's going to be used more often, but it's still a tool. It can't replace kind of human innovation and ingenuity.
Thank you so much, Austin.
Um, yeah, I guess this is probably a convenient place for a plug for my company. So the maybe similar in line with what Young said, I think the two major changes in the industry that I foresee are the rise of personalized omics, like there's different names for it, like personalized medicine, precision medicine, um, and then AI integration. So basically, I think what Jim was referring to was like machine learning. People have been trying to predict stuff from data all the time. I have a slightly different tact here, which is um, given the current trajectory, right? I don't know how many of you have played around with ChatGPT 3 and then 3.5 and then 4 and then now O1. But if you look at the trajectory and I use it all the time. I use it in my daily work. And one of the main litmus tests I use is to ask it like an advanced my job type of question, which is like, how can I improve the sensitivity of my LCMS system, so liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, in non-conventional ways. So up until recently, the answers are like, okay, that's easy. You can Google that. Okay, whatever. That doesn't make any sense. But recent, like O1, uh, it was getting to the point where I was like, okay, this is stuff that I would spend time and think of, and that's a pretty good idea. And I think about this topic like on a weekly basis. So it's um, very specialized and domain specific. And it's getting to the point where I was like, okay, I can see if maybe a few years from now, it might start coming up with ideas that are at least on par with me consistently or better than me. And so it's something to think about. I'm not saying like, oh, we're going to get all replaced or whatever. I think there's a ton of integration work that needs to be done, regulation, for example. But what I think will happen is people that do use it as kind of like a booster to their own work will surpass people who don't use it. For example, I do a lot of software coding and data analysis in my daily work. And if I don't use it, I'm losing like hours. I can just tell it to do this like coding task. It'll put that together for me. I become essentially a manager farming out small subtasks. And if I didn't do that, comparing myself doing that and not doing that, the one that does that is like far surpassing the one that doesn't. So I think AI is going to increase the productivity of a lot of different fields. And I don't think it's like outright replacement. I think it'll be like the users surpass the non-users. For personalized medicine, I think my company's take, we do contract research as like a day job, but actually the whole point of the startup was basically to build direct to consumer personalized we don't call it medicine because it's not medicine, but it's like personalized wellness. So what we want to do is measure as many proteins, lipids, metabolites, chemicals as we possibly can out of your blood. I know you might have heard of this before, maybe by chance, but we actually use an instrument that's tried and true, and we have a platform that's developing. If you're interested in that type of thing, please reach out after the fact, and then we can talk about it. But yeah, so we want to build something like that to elevate. There's kind of like this gap between healthcare, which is really sick care, and then what everybody does. It's really basic, right? Oh, exercise, sleep. But there's a huge gap where I think there's specific interventions and recommendations that can improve people's health, like of the general population, 60% of the people can improve, but they just don't have that information, and it's not easily accessible or known by humans in general. So we're building the platform to collect that data and then provide those recommendations. Yeah. So I think if we don't do it, somebody else will. There's like this opportunity to um, elevate wellness beyond just kind of like a hand wavy new age type thing to something scientific. Um, yeah, it was a little vague, but hopefully you got the gist of it.
Thank you so much. I think a lot of times, you know, when talking to students and just thinking about like AI is the one thing that, you know, students have a lot of questions about, or just, you know, how does it go about affecting your career path? So thank you for talking about that. Thank you about, no, thank you for putting in your thoughts and feedback. And just maybe Austin, I'll start with you with my last question. It's just more of a final thoughts. What are some final thoughts that you have or advice you have for students who are interested in doing what it is that you're doing within the startup, or focusing within maybe the startup setting as it pertains to your field? Just anything that you were like, if I knew this in undergrad, this would have been amazing, or this would have been great. So any final thoughts like that would be great.
Sure. On the startup path, um, I would want someone to tell. I wasn't going to believe anybody anyways, but it's way harder than than people. Well, people said it was really hard. I just didn't believe them. So I would try to like really force myself to understand that as advice. Startups are hard. It's just very stressful. Um, and then if on top of that, if you have plans to start a family, there's like in direct conflict with one another. Like having young kids and doing a startup is it's like oil and water, basically. If you take resources for your family, then you're taking from your startup. If you take resources for your startup, you're basically neglecting your family. So it's horrible there. Um, in terms of like the other advice, I really don't know about the the future, especially as we go further and further out. The AI related conversation, I worry about my kids. Like, do I even send them to college in 20 years when they're college age? If the trajectory is the same, I don't know where we'll be. I hope everybody has like universal basic income or something like that. But I'm sorry, that's not helpful at all, but I don't know about like the far future.
It's scary. It could get scary. That thought could yeah, it could pull you in a scary space. Jim, any final thoughts or advice?
Yeah, I would say my biggest thing, academia and industry are two different beasts. Just kind of remember that. Your advisors, your professors that when I say advisors, I mean specifically professors, not necessarily your career advisors and things, and the support staff within the university. Um, they've been on a trajectory that is not necessarily in line with what industry does. I guess the best example the best description I can kind of give is, both fields would be data driven. Are very very data driven endeavors. In industry, you design an experiment, you do it, you look at the data, and the data leads you directly to onto the path that you're going to go. In my experience in academia, you do the same thing. And if the data doesn't point you into the path that your advisor wanted you to go in, you are encouraged to try to find yourself back to that path that the advisor was originally trying to get to. While in industry will say, well, this doesn't work, so we're going to ignore it and we're going to move in this direction because that's what the data is telling us right now. And that's great for, and the opposite is great for academics, because that's how you get and maintain funding, but that doesn't necessarily work in industry. Also, I would also say the same thing with your CVs and your resumes, make sure you get someone other than a professor. No offense to professors. Make sure you get someone other than a professor to review your resume because they do not know how to. In my experience, they do not know how to write resumes that are um, appealing to hiring managers within the industry. Again, this is specifically for professors, not necessarily for your career counselors.
Young, any final thoughts or advice?
Yeah, so I think definitely thoroughly research the company you want to work for, and continue to learn. And if you have the opportunity to work in a startup, give yourself some experience in working for a startup because you get to learn all kinds of things and wear different hats, and you get to explore what it is that you're really interested in doing. Um, and and when you're working for a company, definitely take on special projects if you have the opportunity. Keep building your worth and your value. Um, I emphasize special projects because every company there are performance reviews, and you can show that you went above and beyond just filling your job description. Um, and yeah, I think definitely having basic macroeconomics and or understanding basic macroeconomics and financial responsibilities is also something that I wish I knew uh, before joining the industry. Um, yeah, and then like what Jim said, working in the industry pops your academia bubble. You're going to meet various people of all ages and different mindsets. And some places that you work in, you'll definitely encounter workplace politics. Um, and for startups and a lot of biotech companies, uh, sometimes you do have to buckle up for layoffs, and company fallouts as well. And then finally, I think prioritizing like your mental and physical well-being is priority number one because work is not everything. And if you need time to de-stress or you need some time off, definitely communicate that to your manager and just take a moment to refresh and then get back to work whenever you can.
Thank you so much. All right, I wanted to open it up to our students before we go into the breakout rooms. Are there any questions from our students to the panelists? Feel free to either raise your hand or unmute yourself. There's a question in the chat. Do you feel secure in your job positions, general job demand? And anyone who'd like to start with that answer or any advice?
So, I can speak for myself. I feel like, well, we're not Amgen, we're not a huge company, but I know that we're as a company we're growing, we're expanding within our facilities, and uh, HR has spoken about increasing headcount, and we still have recruiters posting job openings time to time. So knowing that the company is still growing and um, is doing okay with having clients, and we're growing the number of clients as well. So I feel relatively secure with my job. But also at the same time, it's important to always be prepared for the next steps, like what it is that you want to do in terms of growing your career um, and moving on up ultimately.
I'll continue. Yeah, I advantage of part of the reason why I enjoy working at Amgen is I do very much value job security. And a larger company there is a little bit more job security. Um, for what my group does, it's very critical for the manufacturing process because problems and errors and issues with manufacturing is never going to disappear. So you're always going to need kind of as we like to call ourselves the firefighters to help put out those fires within the organization. Um, but I worked at a smaller company before, and as I mentioned before, the parent company did come in and shut down the whole site, but they also shut down. They also kind of laid us off in about three different ways. And one thing I actually survived until the very end, until the doors actually shut on us. One thing I can say that if that does happen to you, if you're in a position and people are getting laid off around you and you're not, survivor's guilt is a real thing, and you should never feel bad that you were the one who survived. I don't want to make it sound like your coworkers are dying, but um, you know, if that does happen to you, if your company actually does, if you work for a company that is that goes through rough times and lays off some people, and you happen to be ones that keep your job, don't feel bad for your and empathy for your coworkers or your former coworkers, but don't take that on yourself. It is not your fault that you survived. So I just want to kind of emphasize that.
There's a couple more questions. I do want to ask a quick one. A couple students have been asking me also if you do not mind sharing your email with them, if you're open to that idea. I do encourage students to jump onto LinkedIn and connect with you all through LinkedIn if that's okay. But please let me know if you are okay with me sharing your email with them, then I can email them that information as well. If not, then I can definitely have them connect with you on LinkedIn as well. So you all let me know.
You can share mine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll put in the chat here.
Thank you, Young.
Mhm.
Ella had a great question. Do you find that many biotechnology careers are chemistry focused, such that one should look into a degree revolving around chemistry in some type? Um, I'm a general biology major and enjoy chemistry very much, but I don't plan on switching my major. Do you foresee that being an issue with skills, knowledge, or can you learn through the process? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think in what I do, a lot of it is very chemistry based. But that's just within my division. But Amgen is a biotech company, and we produce the majority of our products are grown from cells, and so that does require microbiology and biology based processes, things that I could not do. I have actually tried in my graduate degree. I tried to grow bacteria to that were uh, inoculated with a protein that we were trying to harvest. And me and my entire group, which is all analytic chemists, failed miserably. um, so uh, I would say, having a good mix of that and also understanding the kind of the ideas, way in my experience, and this might be different now because it's been some more years since I graduated. Um, is biology was a lot of memorization and chemistry is a lot of application, learning concepts and applying them. That might not be the case anymore because it's been a, a decade or more since I graduated from college. Uh, but being able to have that kind of skill set, to be able to take in information and apply it in different ways. Um, but also there's other ways of getting that kind of expertise and skill and knowledge base without switching your degree. You could potentially join a research group that is more chemistry based and learn that skill set from them. Just because you did in college doesn't mean it's not experience that you can't list on your resume.
Thank you so much. I am looking at the time. There's a couple great questions in the chat. I do want to open up the breakout rooms, and I think those questions, if you all want to jump into the breakout room for the panelists, they can answer it directly if you like. We are going to be closing out the breakout room in about 15 minutes or so. So let me go ahead and get you guys into the breakout rooms. Thank you